There is a moment most people handle completely wrong. Someone attacks you, publicly, loudly, with confidence, and with an audience watching. They say something about you that is false or unfair or designed to diminish you in the eyes of people whose opinion matters. They challenge your competence, your character, your judgment, your decisions. They do it with the specific energy of someone who has calculated that you will respond and that your response will give them exactly what they need to continue the attack. And almost everyone responds. They defend themselves, they explain, they counterattack, they justify, they provide evidence, they appeal to the audience for fairness. They enter the fight on the terms the attacker has set, in the arena the attacker has chosen, using the weapons the attacker has already prepared for. And they lose. Not always visibly in the moment, but structurally, inevitably, because they have accepted the fundamental premise the attacker required, that the attack deserved a response. Machiavelli watched this pattern destroy brilliant people throughout his career. He watched men of genuine capability reduced and marginalized not by their enemy's strength, but by their own inability to resist the pull toward response. He studied the few who did not respond, who met attack with silence, with stillness, with the patient understanding that the most powerful answer to a loud enemy is often no answer at all. And he built a framework around what those people understood that the responders did not. Today we go through that framework completely. What silence actually does to your enemies. Why it is psychologically more devastating than any counterattack. The specific mechanics of how to use it, when not to use it, and the internal discipline that makes it possible when everything in you wants to fight back. This is not passive advice. This is the most aggressive strategic posture available to you. It just looks like nothing. Part 1. Why your enemy needs your response. Before you can understand why silence is powerful, you need to understand why your response is so valuable to the person attacking you. Every public attack is built on a structural requirement. The requirement is your engagement. Without your engagement, without your defense, your counterattack, your justification, your visible disturbance, the attack is a one-sided event in a vacuum. It sits in the air, directed at someone who did not receive it, and the audience watches a person swinging at something that is not swinging back. This is uncomfortable for the audience, not for you, for the attacker and for anyone watching, because the attacker's entire construction depends on the assumption that you will behave in a predictable way. The attack is designed around your expected response. The narrative they have built requires your participation to function. If you do not participate, if you simply do not enter the arena, the narrative collapses. Not immediately, not dramatically, but structurally it collapses because the second act of the story they are telling, your defense, your counter, your visible wound, never arrives. Machiavelli writes about this in terms of the prince and his critics. He observes that a prince who responds to every critic elevates every critic to the status of a worthy opponent. The response itself is the elevation. It says, what you said was significant enough that I needed to address it. The prince who does not respond has said something different. He has said, what you said was not significant enough to require my attention. And that message, delivered through silence alone, is a more devastating assessment of your enemy's attack than any counter-argument you could construct. You have not engaged their argument. You have bypassed their argument entirely. And in bypassing it, you have treated it as something beneath the threshold of response. For a loud enemy who needs your engagement to justify their loudness, being treated as beneath the threshold of response is the most destructive thing you can do to them. Part 2. The psychological mechanics. Here is what happens inside the attacker when the expected response does not arrive. First one on confusion. The attack was calibrated to produce a response. Every element of it was tuned to create a specific reaction. When the reaction does not come, the system that generated the attack has no feedback. It cannot calibrate. It cannot determine whether the attack landed or missed or was even received. The attacker is left in a state of fundamental uncertainty. Did they hear me? Did I reach them? Am I being ignored? Is the response being prepared? Is something happening that I cannot see? This uncertainty is deeply uncomfortable for the type of person who attacks loudly, Because loud attackers are almost always people who need to know they are being received, who need the confirmation that their words have landed, who need the response, even a hostile one, to validate that what they said mattered. Second, doubt. As the silence extends, the attacker begins to doubt their own attack. Was it as effective as they thought? Did the audience receive it the way they intended? Does the absence of response signal that everyone could see through it? Is the silence a form of contempt, the most stinging possible assessment of their effort? The doubt is corrosive. It works from the inside, and it is entirely self-generated. You produced it by doing nothing, by simply declining to participate. Third, escalation. The attacker who receives silence will almost always escalate. They will attack again, louder, more specifically, more desperately, trying to produce the response that has not arrived. This escalation is their undoing, because escalation without provocation reads to any audience as aggression without justification. The person who attacks once and receives silence and attacks again has revealed something about themselves, that they need the engagement, that they cannot let it go, that something about your silence is driving them forward in ways they cannot control. And the audience watches this. The audience sees someone attacking a target that is not fighting back. They see the escalation. They see the desperation that the escalation implies. And their assessment of the attacker shifts from watching a powerful person make a case against someone to watching an unstable person attack someone who has chosen not to engage. You made none of this happen. You simply said nothing, and your nothing was louder than anything you could have said. Machiavelli calls this forcing the enemy to defeat themselves. The prince who is patient enough, grounded enough, disciplined enough to hold his silence long enough, his enemy will always provide the material for their own destruction. Because the person who needs your response and does not receive it will eventually do something, in the absence of that response, that costs them more than your most effective counterattack ever could. Part 3. The historical evidence. The power of strategic silence is one of the most consistently documented patterns in the history of power. Abraham Lincoln is one of its most well-documented practitioners. Throughout his presidency, he was attacked with a ferocity and personal viciousness that modern observers find difficult to fully appreciate. Members of his own cabinet considered him an embarrassment. Newspaper editors wrote that he was an ape, a buffoon, a disgrace to the office. Political rivals attacked his competence, his origins, his appearance, his intelligence. Lincoln almost never responded, not because he lacked the wit to counter the attacks. His private correspondence shows a man of devastating rhetorical precision when he chose to use it, but he understood something his attackers did not. Every response gave the attack more life. Every defense extended the story. Every counter-argument invited the next round. By not responding, he denied the attacks the oxygen they required. And one by one, across his presidency, the men who attacked him most loudly were diminished not by Lincoln's counterattacks, but by the accumulation of their own words against the backdrop of his silence. Machiavelli documents a similar pattern in the behavior of Cesare Borgia, a man whose capacity for strategic silence Machiavelli explicitly admired. Borgia did not respond to political provocations. He absorbed them. He waited. And his enemies, emboldened by his apparent passivity, overextended themselves. They made moves they would not have made against a target they knew was watching. And Borgia, having waited until the overextension was complete, responded not with words but with decisive action from a position of total information advantage. The silence was the intelligence gathering. The patience was the strategy. And the response, when it came, was devastating precisely because it arrived from a position that the enemy, lulled by months of silence, had stopped defending against. Part 4. The 5 types of silence. Not all silence is the same, and deploying the wrong type at the wrong moment is as costly as responding when you should not have. Here are the 5 types of strategic silence and when to use each. The first type, neutral silence. This is the baseline, the default. When attacked, you do not respond immediately. You allow the attack to exist in the air without acknowledgement. Your face is neutral. Your posture is unchanged. Your behavior in the hours and days following the attack is completely consistent with your behavior before it. You have not gone quiet, you have not retreated, you simply have not acknowledged the attack as significant enough to alter your behavior. Neutral silence is appropriate for most attacks from most sources. It requires no special positioning, no follow-up strategy. It is simply the discipline of not doing the thing you are being provoked to do. The second type, engaged silence. This is the silence that is visibly received but not responded to. You make direct eye contact with the person attacking you. You hear them fully, demonstrably. Nothing in your demeanor suggests you have not received what they said. And then you say nothing, or you redirect the conversation to something completely unrelated, or you speak to someone else in the room as if the attack simply did not occur. Engaged silence is more powerful than neutral silence in situations where the audience needs to see that you heard the attack, where the question is not whether you received it, but what you chose to do with it. And your choice, to hear it and treat it as unworthy of response, is an active, visible judgment made in plain sight. This type of silence requires more composure than neutral silence because you are fully present in the moment of the attack rather than removed from it. The temptation to respond is stronger because the engagement is higher, but the effect on the attacker is significantly more devastating because you looked directly at them, you heard every word, and you decided the words were not worth your voice. The third type, delayed response. This is not silence in the permanent sense. It is the deliberate extension of the gap between attack and response until the strategic conditions for response are optimized. The immediate response is almost always the worst response. It is made from emotion before information is complete, before the attacker has fully extended themselves, before the audience has had time to form independent assessments. The delayed response arrives after the attacker has finished, after the initial reaction of the audience has settled, after you have had time to determine whether a response is warranted at all, and if so, what form it should take. Delayed response is appropriate when the attack contains a specific element that requires correction, a factual falsehood that will calcify if not addressed, a misrepresentation that will affect specific important relationships if left unanswered. In those cases, the delay itself is strategic. You let the attack sit, you let people form their initial reactions to it, and then, days or weeks later, in a different context with different framing, you provide the correction. Not as a response to the attack, as a clarification of the record. You never mentioned the attack. You never acknowledged the attacker. You simply stated what is true, in your own time, on your own terms. The fourth type, strategic misdirection. This is the most advanced form of silence regarding the attack itself, paired with deliberate, visible engagement elsewhere. While the attacker is trying to draw your attention and your response, you are conspicuously investing your energy in something completely unrelated. You are building, creating, advancing, producing in ways that are visible and that draw the audience's attention to what you are doing rather than to what is being said about you. Your work is your response. Your forward motion is your counter-argument. This is what Machiavelli means when he writes that a prince's actions speak so loudly that his enemies cannot be heard over them. Not a clever retort, not a devastating counter-argument, the simple compounding evidence of forward motion. The person who is being attacked and continues to produce visibly impressive work has done something that no words could accomplish. They have demonstrated through behavior rather than speech that the attack did not stop them, did not slow them, did not matter in any operational sense. That demonstration is more convincing than any defense. The fifth type, the terminal silence. This is the most final form of silence, and it must be used with care because it is irreversible. When someone has demonstrated through a sustained pattern of attacks and bad faith that they are not a person you can engage with productively, you permanently remove them from your engagement. Not publicly, not with announcement, not with the dramatic gesture of a declared ending. You simply stop. All engagement ceases. All response ends. All energy flow between you and that person terminates. They can continue attacking. They will continue attacking. But they are attacking into a permanent void, And avoid does not bleed, does not defend, does not provide the drama that their attack requires. Terminal silence is not something you do in anger. It is a strategic determination, made clearly and calmly, that this person's presence in your operational life has no positive return and considerable negative cost. Once made, the determination is final. You do not re-engage in moments of weakness. You do not respond when the attacks become more targeted or more personal. You have made a strategic decision and you hold it, not from stubbornness, but from clarity. Machiavelli writes about the prince who removes a problem rather than managing it indefinitely. Not all problems can be removed, but when removal is possible, when complete disengagement is operationally available to you, it is almost always superior to the endless management of an engagement that produces only cost. Part 5. When not to use silence. Silence is not universally the correct response. Machiavelli is precise about this. The tool must match the situation or it produces the opposite of the intended effect. Here are the situations where silence will cost you. When the attack contains a falsehood that will become established fact if not corrected. Some false narratives, if allowed to sit without correction long enough, become the accepted version of events. If the attack contains a specific, consequential inaccuracy, not an opinion, not a characterization, but a factual claim that will affect how real people make real decisions about your work, your reputation, your relationships, it requires correction. The correction should be made calmly, factually, without acknowledging the attack itself. State the truth as the truth, not as a defense against a specific attacker. When the audience needs to know your position, there are situations where silence will be read not as dignified restraint, but as tacit agreement or inability to respond. When the stakes are high enough and the audience influential enough, when your silence will be interpreted as concession, you must speak. But speak on your terms, at your time, in a form you have chosen, not in the heat of the attack, not in the arena the attacker selected, on your ground with your framing. When your silence enables real harm to continue. If someone is using your silence as cover to continue behavior that damages people or things you are responsible for, silence is not strategy, it is abdication. Speak, act. Take responsibility for the situation your silence is enabling. And when the other person deserves a genuine response, when their challenge is made in good faith, when they represent a legitimate source of accountability, when the relationship is one worth maintaining and their concern is one worth engaging with, silence is not the right tool. Real engagement, honest and direct, is what the situation requires. Silence is a weapon. Like all weapons, it is only valuable when deployed against the appropriate target in the appropriate circumstances. Machiavelli's framework for silence is built on discrimination, the careful assessment of what each situation requires. The person who uses silence as a blanket policy will eventually use it where engagement was required and damage themselves as surely as the person who responds to everything damages themselves. The discipline is knowing the difference. Part 6, the internal practice. None of this is easy to execute. The mechanics of strategic silence are simple to understand and extraordinarily difficult to practice. Because the impulse to respond to attack is not merely habitual, it is biological. It is the threat response running its program, producing the fight impulse, generating the energy that wants to become words, and suppressing that energy, sitting with the discomfort of having been attacked without responding, tolerating the uncertainty of not knowing how the audience is receiving your silence. All of this requires the development of a specific internal capacity that most people have never been asked to build. Here is how to build it. The first practice is reframing the silence from passive to active. Most people experience silence as doing nothing. Strategically, silence is doing something. It is managing the psychology of your enemy, shaping the perceptions of your audience, gathering intelligence and building your next move from a position of information advantage. When you are silent, you are working. You are just working invisibly. Changing how you experience the silence changes how difficult it is to hold. The second practice is directing the energy. The fight response produces real energy. The body prepares for conflict, The mind sharpens, the emotional register heightens. That energy does not disappear when you choose not to respond. It needs somewhere to go. Direct it toward your work, toward the thing you are building, toward the forward motion that is, as we discussed, your most powerful response anyway. The attacker's energy, instead of pulling you into their arena, now fuels your own advance. They did you a service. They just do not know it. The third practice is the long view. The loud enemy attacking you right now seems very important in this moment. Their words seem large. The audience's reaction seems significant. The urgency to respond seems real. Extend the timeline in your mind. 3 months from now, what will matter more? Your response, quickly forgotten, or the compounding evidence of your continued forward motion? A year from now, will anyone remember the specific attack? Or will they remember what you did in the year that followed? Machiavelli had a longer view than almost any political thinker of his era. He measured consequences not in days or weeks, but in years and decades. He watched men destroy themselves in a moment of impulsive response to attacks that history has completely forgotten. And he wrote down what he saw so that the pattern would be available to people who could use it. The pattern is yours to use. The silence is yours to hold. Part 7, and what the silence builds. Beyond what silence prevents, the extended fight, the elevated enemy, the self-generated defeat. There is something it builds. Over time, in the people who witness how you handle attacks, consistently without losing your composure, without entering arenas that are not worth entering, something accumulates. Respect. Not the admiration people feel for a sharp counterattack. Not the excitement of watching someone win a verbal fight. The deeper respect that forms slowly when people observe a person who clearly has the capacity to respond and consistently chooses to direct that capacity elsewhere, who is clearly not unable to fight back, but who has apparently calculated that fighting back is not worth their time. That perception of someone who could engage and chooses not to is one of the most powerful status signals available. It communicates without words that you have better things to do, that your attention is valuable and the attacker is not worth its expenditure, that your time horizon is longer and your perspective broader than the current conflict. It communicates in the most economical possible way that you are the larger presence in the room, and the attacker, who needs to be the larger presence, who built their attack around the assumption that engaging you would elevate them to your level, finds the opposite has happened. By not engaging, you have made the gap between you visible. You have not done it through assertion or counterattack. You have done it through the visible, deliberate allocation of your attention toward things that are not them. Your silence was the assessment. Your forward motion was the verdict. And neither required you to say a single word against them. There will be a moment, soon perhaps, when someone attacks you, publicly, loudly, in a way designed to produce a response. When that moment comes, remember what you now know. They need your response. The attack is not complete without it. The narrative they have built requires your participation to function. Do not participate, not because you cannot respond, because responding is exactly what they built this for. Instead, hold the silence. Direct the energy toward your work. Let the absence of your response sit in the room longer than feels comfortable, and watch what the silence does to the person who needed you to break it. Watch them escalate. Watch the escalation reveal them. Watch the audience, initially uncertain, begin to orient toward the person who is moving forward against the person who is standing still, attacking a target that has already left the arena. You did not win by fighting. You won by not being where they were swinging. That is Machiavelli's deepest lesson on enemies. Not how to defeat them, how to make the fight unnecessary by refusing to be in it. The next video in this series covers how to identify in advance who is worth engaging with and who is not. The specific signals that distinguish a genuine challenge from a manufactured one, and why the distinction is the most important assessment you will make in any conflict. Share this with someone who needs it. I will see you in the next one.